Bone Camera by Georg Guillemin, Chapter 1, Part 1. My name is Nina. I'm 20 years old, and for the first 18 of these years I lived with my mother, who named me after her best friend. We were very close, and you could say that over time I took the place of my namesake as her best friend, in fact her only friend. But then one night last year, Mum died, and she did not die in her sleep, nor was she old or ill, and yet she clearly was not well in any but the literal sense. No, it is me. I am the one to blame, more so than anybody else. Perhaps you think I am being hard on myself, that in my grief I feel I could have done more, or should have done less. But you will see. That day I had come up for the weekend before daybreak, a 3-hour drive up from Point Reyes, where I was doing this internship. Apart from just wanting to see her, there were things I needed to talk to her about, and needed to talk about badly. So when I got to Grandma Lillian's house, the place we used to live at and where I am staying now, bone tired from the night ride home, I found Mum sitting in the kitchen in the dark. She had been up all night, or so it seemed, waiting for me, the one who would not come, and when she did come was too wasted to talk. And yet we talked until I sat there weaving and weeping and fled upstairs to throw myself down onto what is still my bed. You would not believe the dreams I had. When I woke late that day, Mum's car was gone. So was her photo gear. Grandma was down in the city, and when she returned, she could not say what her daughter was up to whenever she drove off like that. But it was pretty clear that Grandma had never made much of an effort to find out. After dinner, I sat out on the porch with Grandma for the longest time, waiting up, watching the stars come out one by one, and then all of them at once. Later, when it cooled off, there was a breeze down from Lake Alpine, and you could smell the bear clover on the wind. It grows up in Avery, not all that far, but it does not grow here in Calaveras. We talked about all kinds of stuff, mostly about Natalie, who is her daughter and my mom. It must have been going on midnight before we turned in, and when eventually I went to sleep, I asked the Lord my soul to keep, but he kept hers. The milky light of the new day was seeping over the windowsill when I woke with that sense of dread that makes us start out of dreams sometimes, heart pounding hard without apparent cause for alarm. It was not a bad dream that woke me though, and there was plenty of cause. When I woke, it was to the sound of someone going down hard in the room next door. Coming out of deep slumber, I did not even have the nerve to convince myself it was not Mom's room from where the racket had come. It may have been this nameless dread that made me dawdle and take up more time than necessary to get up. I almost did not get up at all. So it was minutes rather than seconds before I got out of bed. In fact, I may have dozed off again before I finally lurched and forced myself to tiptoe down the hall just to make sure that Grandma Lillian had not fallen on her way to the bathroom, or that she had not been murdered in her sleep, or, on a less dramatic note, to make sure it was just Mom whom I had heard. The door to Mom's room was ajar, and peeking through I saw that it was already too late. I was so shocked by what I saw that I did not feel anything at all, just realized I had almost known I would be too late before I reached her room. The room was dark, but still I saw a propped up, shattered mirror that did not belong in there at all, and that was now a glittering more. In front of it I saw Mom lying curled up in a black puddle, looking too small for her size, but it was her all right. She was not wearing anything except the camera in her right hand. There was no telling why she had no clothes on, and no time to ask. Here is what I figure must have happened. Having set up the camera in such a way that the mirror would show her face in the first light of day through the bay window in her room, while not showing the camera itself, she must have undressed, wound the film in her mamia, inserted the cable release into the jacket, and holding the plunger in her right hand, must have looked through the viewer at the hazy reflection of the chair back that doubled as herself. As she could not take up the position she wanted to pose in and look through the viewer at the same time, she had put a chair where she thought she would stand and tried to focus on that. The idea being that once she was done focusing, she would step back, move the chair, and take its place to take her picture, the last picture, the one that would conclude a certain cycle with the one face she truly cared about. She must have tinkered with it for a long time, perhaps getting impatient, careless, or perhaps still drowsy with sleep, assuming she had slept at all. Anyway, when she had finally moved the chair with one hand, the hand holding the plunger in the other, she must have miscalculated in the dim light and kicked over the tripod with the heavy camera on top, sending it straight into the mirror. Having neither of her hands free to support herself, and what against anyway, all it took to knock her off balance was the tightening cable of the release. Trying to steady herself against the chair she was holding up, she crashed headfirst into the ruined mirror, shards of glass sticking up bright like upside-down icicles, nearly cutting her head off and neatly severing the jugular. She had about a minute or two in which she would have been saved, though I cannot say by whom or by what. What was I to do as she lay in this mess of glass and hair, not moving, and with blood pooling around her, and so much of it? What to do? I simply plopped down next to her as if my bones had liquefied, lay down right next to her, me and what little life was left inside of me, so that perhaps the rust-scented flood that was drowning her would drown me too, and make us mermaids floating in twinned limbo, forever in a scarlet sea.